All right, Boker Tov, good morning. I'm Rabbi Stephen Moskowitz of Congregation Lador Vador, and this is our Monday Musings, in which we offer a spiritual kickstart to the week. First of all, I apologize. Our streaming service is down at the moment, so I'm recording this, and then I'll put it up on Facebook later today. So I'm joined by Rabbi Ross Singer, a friend and colleague. We've known each other for I think 13 some odd years. Ross is an Orthodox rabbi, an Israeli tour guide, and we really hope and pray that the touring comes back to Israel very soon, and that you're able to lead tours and teach people, which I know is something that you love and that you've been unable to do. You're now working, you've told me, on a translation of Rav Kook's letters, so he is also a translator. Ross and I met in the Rabbinic Leadership Initiative of the Shalom Hartman Institute some years ago. We studied together. We were in RLI 3, the last cohort that had the privilege of studying with Rabbi David Hartman, Zichrono Livracha. And Ross lives in Kibbutz Ma'ale Gilboa in Israel. So Ross and I thought that we would spend some time talking about our relationship to Israel and where Israel fits in our faith and our belief. And so Ross, I thought I would turn to you first. You and your family made Aliyah some 10 years ago, moved to Israel. And I wanted you to share with us sort of, where that came from and why you made that choice.
Sure, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And for me, the story is pretty personal. I would say that my journey to Aliyah began probably when I was 17 years old. My father passed away that year. And I was a pretty, I would say, an underachieving kid. I didn't put a lot of energy into things in life and was coasting along. I had a nice, pleasant life, but wasn't really energized or passionate or serious about much, like most teenagers. And after my father died, that had an effect on me. And I started to think about like what life was about. And I started to read. I wasn't really a reader before that. And when I was in United Synagogue Youth, they gave us a book. Every convention we get a new book. And I would take the books and I would put them right on my shelf without cracking the spine at all. Anyway, I started to think like started to be a more serious person. And I took one of those books off the shelf. The title of it was Self-Portrait of a Hero. And it was a collection of Yoni Netanyahu's letters. Yoni Netanyahu is the late brother of our current Prime Minister, Bibi Netanyahu. And I started to read this book and I was sort of slapped across the face because the beginning of the book is Yoni Netanyahu is with his father, who's on sabbatical, and it really stays on sabbatical in Philadelphia. So he's a 15, 16-year-old kid, and the early letters of the book are letters to his friends. And he's talking about American youth, okay? And he says that basically American youth are interested in sex, cars, rock and roll. And he says, I miss Israel. I miss where I can be around people who think deep thoughts, who care about their society, who are trying to improve themselves. And here's the thing, I saw myself in the critique that Yoni Netanyahu had for American youth. And I said, wow, there's like way too much of me in here. And as I read the book, I sort of discovered this amazing person who was willing to sacrifice life and limb for something greater than himself, who was also like a philosopher, who got into Harvard, who was clearly a deep intellectual, but gave up kind of like the prestige of Harvard to go back to Israel and serve in the IDF and take on greater and greater responsibilities. So like this role model for me at an early age represented something about becoming a different kind of person. And I would say also connecting to my father, who was a serious person, right? So like this sort of wanting to grow into be someone who was who was more responsible, who was more thoughtful, who had aspirations, who wanted to make the world a better place. So that became associated for me with, to some extent, Yoni Netanyahu, one of the first books I read at this point in my life, and by extension with Israel, right? And then my experiences in Israel, I would say, fortified that kind of idea about what Israel's about a place where people are less materialistic, a place where people are more focused on community, are more focused on society. One example I could give is supposedly in statistics that are, we say that like 75% of statistics are made up on the spot. Anyway, I read somewhere that there are more books published per capita in Israel than any other place. Like people are reading and thinking. And so that's drove me to want to make Aliyah. Now, it took from the time I was 17 till I made Aliyah, it took about 23 years. But there were close calls where the Aliyah could have been earlier, but life got in the way here and there. But eventually, we made it.
I want to make a couple of observations and then and ask you some more questions about this. I remember reading that book as well. It had a deep impression on me too. And I remember reading. It was, what's the other book? Letters to American Jewish Friend. The other book in terms of the Zionist critique of America, and also the advocating for Zionist philosophy. I'm very taken by Zionism and by Israel, and I admire your choice. Part of what I want to ask you is, have you found, sort of like, you painted this, this dream and this sort of idealistic notion, you've been living there for 10 years, you and your family. How has it fit the dream? And how has it, and how has it not?
That's a great question. I would say that since it was a 25-year, almost a 25-year journey from, let's say, redirecting my life sort of towards a richer Judaism. I mean, that's another thing for me to stay here, that part of it also wasn't just Zionism, but Judaism in general, right? And the Judaism deeply connected to Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael, to the land and to the people of Israel. But in any event, because it was a long journey, I kind of learned a lot of the warts and blemishes of Israel along the way. And I didn't come here at age 40 starry-eyed, right? So that said, it has been an inspiring, wonderful experience, and also disappointing as well, right? It's been a little bit of both. I would say, like, for my kids, I'm so glad I raised them here. Can
you say a little bit? Say some more about that piece in particular.
Okay, so first of all, right, like my kids have managed, I think, to bring the best of America and the best of Israel together. That's how I see them. So they bring some of the politeness of America. They bring some of the tolerance and thoughtfulness that I associate with America, and that is less associated with Israel. But there's, here on our kibbutz, we've spoken about this. No one judges anyone else by the home they live in or the cars they drive in. And if they do, they judge them negatively if they live in too large a house. You follow me? Like it's like, what do you need all that for? Is kind of like the attitude. There's a very healthy sense of modesty here. There's a very healthy sense of a need to contribute to society. Now, I'm living in a very specific place, and not every place in Israel, I think, would be as ideal for me. But this has been an amazing place to raise kids. The role models, the idea of people constantly thinking, what can I do for our community? I didn't find in America, in my experience, the level of awareness of community that I find where I live. And my children are better than me about it. I love that.
I do. You could probably make the argument that it depends where you live in Israel, and it depends where you live in America. Sort of the town, the kibbutz. I mean, it all of those are factors. But
for sure,
I do think, Israel is still young by comparison. And there's still a sense of, I'm participating in building up. That I don't think is the same, and that to me is one of the stark differences. The age of the countries.
Yes.
So, and that piece is very important in terms of the values it instills in young people. Tell me a little bit more about the Jewish piece, because we've kind of spoken more in terms of Zionism in the country. Like, how does this fit in your faith? And is it easier to be Jewish or better to be Jewish in Israel? Is that what you're saying? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Great. It's a bit mixed. There are certainly aspects that I think are better and fuller and richer. I would say as a member of the Orthodox community, and particularly my community's niche in the Orthodox community, we are more relaxed around being creative and exploring, other options within our understanding of what Torah is all about than many in the United States are. Because we don't worry about assimilation. We don't worry the way that some communities in the United States do. So we got some amazing stuff going on, like combinations of Orthodox Judaism and postmodern thought, things like that, that are just like, everyone's okay with it. So that I think is better. If I go back to including this question, and also, what the harsh reality of living in Israel, I could say that, I've certainly been a little bit disappointed with Israel in terms of the discrimination that's part of the society. Whether we're speaking about the Arab minority in Israel, or our treatment of Arabs living in Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank, however you'd like to refer to it, and even within inner Jewish discrimination that you sometimes hear. So those are examples of things that are problematic to me, and unfortunately, I don't know if this is Israel, but it certainly is. Well, it's not just an issue of Israel, but I would say to some extent, I think that it's exacerbated in Israel because of our conflict with people who are different than us, that it's not just about that they're different. Many of them want to hurt us and even kill us, right? So there's a reflexive piece in Israel against others that is, I think, acute here, that I don't like. That's part of that is troubling for me religiously. Yeah. So there are many things that are beautiful and enhancing, and there are other things that are troubling.
Yeah, I have, one of my frustrations, with Israel is, I love Israel, but the great frustration is, that security is often used as sort of a reason why we don't have to deal with some of these sort of internal, challenges. We're constantly pushing it off It's like, oh, we can't deal with it now because we have, this worry over there. And I just don't think that's, that's to Israel's, detriment. I mean, I don't understand why both can't be worked out at the same time when these are things that we, as you said, the internal conflicts among Jews and with Arabs living in Israel. I think these are things that really Israel needs to focus on for it to live up to its vision of itself and sort of the dreams that you've alluded to. For me, there is something qualitatively different, walking the streets of Israel, and in particular Yerushalayim of Jerusalem, than the streets of New York. There's an immediate sense of feeling at home, even though it's not literally my home. It's, as soon as I arrive, it's sort of like the sense of there's a sense of arrival, unlike coming to and arriving at any other country.
I would say for me, as I look at it, Israel's not the place that you live. It's not the place that Rabbi Moskowitz lives, but it is your home.
Right.
Right. And I would make a distinction between those things, right? Like, I grew up in Houston, Texas, to a certain extent. I don't live in Houston anymore, but when I go there, there is a sense of being at home, at a place that touches who you are, right, on a very core inner sense. And that's how I understand your feeling. You're not in the home that you live in, but in another sense, you really are home, even though you're not a citizen and I am. We both share this as a home.
Right. Well, that is the important piece about Israel. It's offered that sense of home and return to all Jews. I don't think my hope for everyone is that we can all sort of feel that and sense that. Most people are not going to make the choice that you and your family made in terms of making Aliyah and moving to Israel. But just to go there and visit and to grab a sense of that is enormously important.
Yeah.
So Ross, I want to thank. We really just got rolling in a way. But this is as I promised, this is a spiritual kickstart. It's not a completion of the topic or discussion. So we're going to have to do this some more so we can kind of complete some of these topics. But I want to thank you. It's great having you visit with us from Israel. I hope to see you in Israel, sometime very soon, which will mean that you'll be leading tours and I'll be able to travel to Israel. So both of those things that we love so much, and that of course has been put on hold recently. So thank you again for joining us. You're welcome. I'm really grateful. I appreciate you sharing your honestly, your personal story and journey.
Thank you.